What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We are back with week 2 predictions and previews of all the rugby games. The first one is going to be England versus Italy. I'm still going to be working with this created England team that I have. They are rated slightly lower than Italy, so we're going to play as England. There's so much to talk about, especially in this first week of rugby that we've had. So let's jump in. Let's get this game kicked off. Alrighty, George Ford is going to get us kicked underway. So it was a big first week of rugby, a bunch of potential upsets, you could call them. Scotland coming out of the blocks, managing to beat England in Twickenham. We had Wales beating a 14-man Ireland that looked like they were absolutely out for blood. We had a France doing exactly what we expected France to do and just running rampant. So coming into this England versus Italy game, both teams not off to the best start in the Six Nations, so they've got a lot to improve on. Let's start off by talking about England, seeing as we're playing as them. The game against Scotland went absolutely nowhere for them. I was astonished to see this. Something I didn't know was how little time some of the players had leading up to the internationals, but I'm not sure if that's that much of an excuse. I mean, they are professional rugby players, they still have played a lot of time, they still had time in training sessions. I thought they would have been up to a little bit of a better standard, but they just didn't seem to fire on all cylinders at all. Scotland were really impressive. If any of you watched the video that I did where I did a bit of a breakdown of the Autumn Nations Cup final, in that game where I watched a very sort of low-class France team managing to compete against a top-tier England team, something that I did point out, and I noticed anyway, was that to me, if you play a lot like England do, they actually really struggle to compete against you. I think it works very well if you apply the pressure, a lot of back kicks, kicking over the top, trying to pin the other team back, and you're winning at the breakdown in the defensive line. England seem to really struggle to come up with a B plan, and we got to see it last week with just how dominant Scotland were, and England just didn't seem to have a lot of answers. No one, in fact, really stood out in this England team last week. Itoje did quite well in that first half, managing to get a couple of charge downs. I actually thought that Jamie George had a relatively decent defensive game. I got completely blown out of the water by a lot of people talking about the team of the week. Everyone wanted to see the Scotland hooker in rather than him, but there we go. That was just my opinion on the games. So leading into this game, England have got a lot to improve on. So checking out the forwards, there's been some big switch-ups. Vunipola, Cowan-Dickie, Kyle Sinclair. So Sinclair coming back into the team. I believe he was sort of banned still, or Eddie Jones had a bit of an issue with his ban, so that's why Kyle Sinclair wasn't in the first game. Cowan-Dickie's going to be replacing Jamie George, so obviously Eddie Jones didn't agree with it. Jamie George had a good game either. And Mako Vunipola coming back into the team. So making a strong front row, they're going to want to play big for this one. Itoje and Johnny Hill still going to retain that 4 and 5. I thought Itoje had a relatively decent game, but he is a bit of a class player, especially in this lineup. Courtney Lawes moving to 6, which is not a position I get to see him in an awful lot, so it'll be interesting to see how he manages to cope in the flanker position. Billy Vunipola is going to take 8, of course he will. He'll be hoping to not get any more yellow cards or just do something, really. I mean, there seemed to be the only attack plan for England in that Scotland game was give the ball to Billy and see if he can do something. And finally, Tom Curry in 7, a man who I praise very highly in an awful lot of videos, wasn't really firing on all sparks at all. There was a lot of penalties coming from him. I don't know whether that was frustration or there was some sort of rules that he wasn't completely aware of, but every so often he was just giving away penalties that felt completely unnecessary. Normally such a good player, but overall a strong 1-8. I mean, this is an England team. We know they're going to put out big boys. I'm sure Eddie Jones will be looking to improve an awful lot on that game they had against Scotland. I'm sure this will be the front row to do it. Very powerful bunch of front boys that are going to be able to win in a lot of scrums and theoretically a lot of rucks. Not that they did that against Scotland, but we'll see how they get on. Moving to the backs. There's only been a little bit of a switch-up. Ben Young still retaining that 9. I think he's still definitely going to remain the top 9 at the minute. I don't know if anyone does know. Has anyone heard from Harry Randall recently? What's going on in his world? I thought maybe he would be looking up for a potential 9 call-up at this point. George Ford's going to be coming back into that 10. Obviously, that B-style sort of plan they have where they move Farrell back into that 10 shirt didn't work against Scotland. They're going back to the Eddie Jones special. Move Farrell back to 12. Put Ford on at 10. Henry Slade going to be taking the 13, which was a bit of a surprise. I did think that this could be a big game for Odogwu to get blooded. I thought maybe going in against the Italy team. He's a big boy, he's a bit rapid. The Italy team actually looked relatively okay in terms of defence against straight line and set play manoeuvres. They looked like they could hold their own. Where Italy began to really falter was the broken play. So I thought maybe they would want some bigger boys on that to break tackles and try and get some running lines through a bit of gaps, try and disrupt their defensive element. They haven't gone for it. Henry Slade's still a good player, very quick, very good kicker, but I'm sure they'll be wanting to try and improve a little bit in that backline as well. Johnny May being a special one in that regard. He got what was it, about 3 knock-ons from high up and under balls. I don't think he will have been happy with his game at all. I don't think I saw him do anything, really. Johnny May not doing a very impressive game. I don't think he'll be very happy with that. But I don't believe there's a great deal of wingers for contention for that left wing shirt. Anthony Watson, very similar. He seemed to be trying to do something, at least when he had the ball, but nothing really that impressive there. And of course, Elliot Daly. So in terms of the team overall, it is still a strong team. And you've got to give credit to an England team when they come in with this amount of force. They're obviously going in to win this game against Italy. They're obviously looking to not have that game against Scotland define their Six Nations. It's still a big team. So many of these people we would see in a World Cup final. So many of them have so many caps. They are very talented players. So you can't call them out on it. I think they just had a very bad game against Scotland, and I think they underestimated how strong that Scotland team was going to be leading into that game. But overall, I think it's a strong England team, but it's going to be interesting to see how they cope with bouncing back from that game. I'm sure Eddie Jones will want to see a lot of improvement in a lot of key areas, and this is where replacements could come in really useful for this England team. So moving on to the finishers, Jamie George relegated to the bench, but I'm sure they'll be looking for him to come on in that second half against a bit of a tireder Italian team. Some of the forwards have had a bit of weakened legs. Bring him on, get those kicks to the corner, get the line out mauls. Jamie George is your guy to finish them off there. Ellis Genge, I think, is still a very good player. I'm sure he'll be doing a lot of good work, and Will Stewart. So they're pretty much trying to change up this front row, trying to get some new people, trying to work out some new combinations. But I think overall it's a pretty strong front row replacement. Charlie Ewells, who I'm looking forward to seeing. Actually, we don't get to see a lot of game time from him, so he'll be looking forward to doing well. Ben Earl, I think, is a really good player. I'm sure he'll do a lot of damage. I imagine they tend to do with Ben Earl. They like bringing him on very early in the second half. What I've seen, the 45th, 50-minute marker seems to be where he comes on just to apply a bit of pressure. He's a big, big boy. In terms of tackling and turnovers, is very, very good. Jack Willis, of course, we will see an appearance from at some point. Dan Robson, who did not have a good game, coming on from the bench and box kicking a metre. I don't know how far he kicked the ball in that first box kick, but it was not good. And finally, Max Malin. So, of course, we didn't get to see a lot of again last week. I still don't know why they don't trust him to maybe have a starting role, get him a bit of game time in the starting team, but hopefully we will get to see a little bit from him. I think they'll fare an awful lot better against Italy in terms of the breakdown. Of course, the Italy team isn't the best it probably could be at the minute, so I think they're in for a good one here. So I'm hoping to see some of these England players stand up a little bit. I am surprised there haven't been more debuts. Maybe he didn't want to underestimate Italy the same way I think happened with Scotland, but I thought maybe this would be a good game to try and get some new players on. You know the Grand Slam's already gone. I'm sure you can still win the Six Nations and you can still crack on. You're going to want to get a bonus point from this game. But I thought it would be a good time to maybe get a few more debutants in the starting line against Italy, seeing as Italy didn't impress particularly well against that France team. Speaking of which, let's move on and talk about this Italy team. So Italy, of course, last week played France and got demolished, I think would be a key word to use. We all sort of expected it. I called it to be a 40-point gap win to France, and it ended up being exactly 40 points. Italy really, really struggled. Obviously, this is a much sort of younger team in terms of caps. There's not as many caps as they would like. They're missing a lot of players because of injury, so they are having to try and work with what they can do. There were a couple of people that I thought did well. Lucas Brandio, of course, getting his try that came out of absolutely nothing, so it shows they do have danger players. Ignacio Brex was doing well, wasn't he? Having some really good attacks. I thought he was a very defensive centre, but it was nice to see him doing a few runs, making a few metres. Trula, I thought, had a very difficult game. I did sort of call it in the preview last week that I didn't think Trula was the right call at full-back, especially against a team that we know is going to kick to that backfield. I don't think he's quite as experienced in that backfield, and I do think he struggles a little bit with positioning of where to deal with kicks. And I think coming up against an England team, you won't want to be seeing him come up against some of the kicks that I'm sure Farrell and Ford will be able to put over the top. And finally, Garbisi was one that did actually impress me last week. I thought he ran the ship pretty well from the front, trying to do as much as he could. But overall, it wasn't going to go too well for them. France coming in, they were always going to play as well as they could do. They put on their big boy team. There was no messing about from that France team, and they did manage to break through the defence and make some good lines. So moving into this England game, it's a pretty unchanged side. Apart from really the front row is what jumps out to me here. They're obviously trying to work out the combinations. When we did do the team announcement for Italy before all the games kicked off, we did sort of point out how many of these front row players they have. So they're probably looking to mix up some combos, trying to work in who's going to go in that front line. I'm sure they've got a couple of contenders, especially at the 1 and 3 areas. So they're going to mix it up a little bit. Lazzaroni, Ceci, Negri, Maya. Lamaro. They're gonna keep these set players. I don't think they have a great deal of options, unfortunately. Stephen Varney didn't have a terrible game, but it was far from wanting, I would probably say. I think he would like to have had a little bit of a better game. Paolo Garbisi, of course, I actually thought had a relatively good game. He seems to be the only real attacking threat in that Italian team for the majority of the game. He seems to be wanting to get the team going forwards, but the tiredness did seem to kick in quite easily. Montana Ioane, this is one point that I was quite surprised at. I really thought Italy were going to tie down Teddy Thomas in that last game. I thought by having Ioane and Brex on Teddy Thomas's wing, you weren't going to be able to see him make an awful lot of ground, and I don't think they were really expecting that Teddy Thomas, for some reason, ended up playing most of the game on the left wing. Almost every attack I saw from him was carving through that left wing rather than the right wing, but hopefully we can see a little bit more from them. They have made a bit of a switch this time. They have gone for Carlo Canna at that 12 shirt with Ignacio Brex. They're playing a much more defensive setup here. I think it's the good move to play against England, especially in England that might not be firing on all cylinders. This could be the one to try and hold your own against. Try not to concede too many points. I'm sure England are just going to drive for an awful lot of penalties here, but they know they need 4 tries. So I think putting on a slightly more defensive team is going to be useful for them. Lucas Barandio, yeah, I think he had a good game last week, actually, managing to get a try out of nothing. Did impress me a little bit, so hopefully we'll be able to see him do the same thing. And then, of course, Trula in that backfield. Hopefully he can have a better game than he did last week. He was okay with the ball in hand, in all honesty. I was quite impressed when he was running. But in terms of his defensive effort, when he was in that backfield, there were so many errors. So many times there was just open space, ball being kicked over the top, finding grass. I think he needs just to work on that positioning and that backfield kick. But overall, this is about as strong an Italian team as they can come up with at the minute. I think they've made some interesting changes. Hopefully the scrum will be able to hold up. I'm sure England will be looking to try and dominate this scrum, to be honest. So hopefully they can hold their own and don't give away too many penalties. In terms of the replacements, there's some big names in there, to be honest. Fischetti, Zalocci, so they'll be coming on. They'll be trying to reinforce them. I think what Italy are going to go for here is they need to keep ball in hand. There was a lot of times in that France game where they seem to be moving forwards only for someone to kick France the ball, and I don't really understand the point. They must know they are not the big attackers in this game. They can't hold out the defensive line if the other team has the ball. So you just need to take your time in attack. You need to work through the phases, and eventually you have people like Ioane and Canna and Brex and Garbisi, people that can work their way through. Sperandio, we got to see making his own line when he needed to. What I would like to see Italy doing now is just holding down that game, maybe work their way through a little bit, slowly build an attack, try and get yourself some points. A big thing for me that Italy seem to do is when they get penalties and potentially kicking opportunities, they still try and go for that try. I would like to see them maybe work on trying to get some 3 points in penalties, maybe even going for some drop goals. I'm not sure what the capacity is for players in here who are very good at drop goals, but I definitely think it should be worth the option just to try and get some points. And if they can hold that defensive line with Brex and other strong defenders, I think maybe they could try and hold England to not a terrible score, but I definitely don't really see this being a winning Italy side. But who knows? We've had upsets already, so who knows what's going to happen. But anyway, people want to know about my prediction. My prediction for this game, who do I think is going to win? I think it has to be called an England win. I do think they'll be going for that bonus point opportunity. They need to try and get back into the Six Nations now after that first loss. So I am going to call it's going to be an England win. I don't think it'll be as much as France. I think I see England winning by about 30. I'm going to say the first half is going to be quite defensively based. I think Italy will hold their own, and then it will come into that second half when England begin to put on a few more speedy players. I think it'll begin to open up a little bit, and that could be where we see tries coming. But who knows? There's always sort of surprises coming up. Of course, these are previews and predictions are just guesses. I've had a couple of comments, people asking me why my predictions are wrong. I have no influence on the real game, so I don't know why people leave comments like that. But there we go, guys. That's going to be my opinion on the game. Let me know down in the comments who you think's going to win. What do you think the score's going to be? Do you reckon there could be a huge upset here and Italy could take this one? Is this going to be an England demolishing? Are England going to be able to get their game back on track after that first one? Who knows what's going to happen? Make sure you drop it down in the comments. If you are enjoying the series, we are going to be doing it for the other games as well, so make sure you subscribe just to keep up to date with all the latest videos as they come out. I will see you all next time, guys. Bye bye.